Hola, buenos días, buenas tardes o buenas noches y bienvenido o bienvenida a este video. Today I'm going to be telling you the story of how I became fluent in Spanish. So I started learning at age 14 in high school. I had Maestra Lance and I absolutely loved her and she absolutely loved me, which was kind of funny because a lot of students weren't the biggest fans of her, but I think it's because in high school, I'm sure you probably know, most of us, when learning a language in high school, oftentimes don't really care that much. And even if we do care, we forget everything we learned because, we give it up or whatever. Well, I actually took an interest in Spanish. It was interesting because before I went to high school, I had older friends who were in high school. I was in middle school, but I had some older friends. I felt very cool, by the way, because of that I have older friends that were taking Spanish classes and had told me, Nate, Spanish sucks. You're gonna hate it. The homework is impossible. And it's basically just the worst thing to have ever been invented. So when I went into my first Spanish class with Maestra Lance, I was thinking, well, I'm gonna hate this. And unfortunately, it's a requirement. So I'm going to need to take Spanish for 3 years. Man, this sucks. Well, whatever. But after my first class with her, I was very confused. I thought to myself, oh, wow, this is kind of cool. I mean, I can make new sounds with new kinds of people. And now, all of a sudden, I can have a different connection with a person that maybe I would have never been able to connect with. And as I'm from Southern California, I found that this was extremely useful because a lot of my friends were native Spanish speakers. And so I thought to myself, oh, well, this might be kind of fun. I mean, maybe I can go practice with Luis or Aaron or David. And I can say, hey, would you mind helping me? The reality is I'm going to have to learn this language for 3 years. It's a requirement, for high school here in California. Why don't I just, at least try? But ultimately what ended up happening is that not only did I try, but I actually just fell in love with learning Spanish. Okay, so that's really important. And I always tell my students, it's really important to have a positive mindset going into learning Spanish and think about those storylines that maybe you're telling yourself. Oh, I don't have enough time. Oh, I'm too old. Learning languages just isn't for me, okay? So if you're telling yourself that, well, then the reality is you're probably not going to learn Spanish or you're not going to learn to the level that you would like to learn, okay? So I think this taught me, hey, enjoy the process, have a good time. Maybe it's gonna take a little bit and that's okay, but mindset is very, very important. In fact, I always tell people, I never actually had the intention of learning Spanish to fluency. It just kind of happened as a byproduct of me showing up, enjoying the process, and then over time, I quickly realized, oh, hey, I can speak Spanish and people understand me, and this is actually pretty cool, okay? But it all started at age 14. I'd also like to note that a lot of things on the whiteboard here, obviously I'm going to go over, but there are other things that I'm going to talk about that I haven't, explicitly written here. So I hope that you can get to the end of this video, get some value, and see kind of how I was able to become fluent in Spanish. Okay, so this is important to understand. I was going to class 5 days a week for 45 minutes. Now, maybe the classes for me at the time were a little bit basic. There were lots of things that felt repetitive and kind of useless, to be honest with you. And I think many of us felt this way in our high school Spanish classes. But there is something to be said, okay, for this. 45 minutes a day, 5 days a week. I mean, it's a lot of practice. I mean, if you were to think about your own Spanish learning journey, how much time are you actually dedicating to learning? 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, 0 minutes a day? So that's important to note, okay? I always tell my students that there is no best method to learn Spanish, okay? Everyone talks about comprehensible input, don't speak, or people say, hey, you need to speak from day one, or do this, don't do that, no, do this, blah, 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 blah. Personally, I think it's pretty unfortunate because it overwhelms students, it confuses them, and they say, hey, Nate, but this guy said this, or oh, hey, she said this. Here is the reality. The best method when it comes to learning anything, not just learning Spanish, is to put in the work consistently. Maybe you don't have the best method, and maybe at first you're working harder instead of working smarter. But as time goes on, you will refine your learning process. You'll figure out what you like, what you don't like. You'll figure out, hey, I feel like this has a big impact. I feel like this doesn't have a big impact. But the number one most important thing, the best method when it comes to learning anything is to just put in the work consistently. Even at first, if you don't have the best method, okay? Don't fall into the trap of analysis paralysis because you're gonna say, oh, I can do this and I have this app and blah, 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 blah. You're gonna end up procrastinating, get overwhelmed, and you're not gonna do anything, okay? So just put in the work and do it consistently, all right? That's a big lesson to be learned there, all right? Next was Lunch with Luis. Okay, so if you didn't know, I have a podcast called the Suave Spanish Podcast, and I do it with my best buddy Luis. Okay, so I met Luis when I was 12 years old. Crazy to think about, I'm 25 now. And Luis is a native Spanish speaker coming from Aguascalientes, Mexico, a very beautiful state right in the smack dab middle of Mexico. And when I first started learning Spanish, I said, wait a second, Luis is a native Spanish speaker. Why don't I practice with him? So honestly, thanks to Luis, I learned a lot of Spanish because I knew and trusted Luis, and I was able to go to him and say, hey, Luis, can I practice with you? And kind of the story I've told over the years is that I went up to him and I said, hey, Luis, I just had my first Spanish class. Do you mind if I just practice with you? Like, I don't want to offend you or make you seem like I like trying to make fun or like, I just want to learn. Like, this actually seems kind of cool. Can I say something to you and, maybe we could have a little conversation? He said, yeah, sure, go for it. So I said, like, buenos dias in this horrible accent. He said, yeah, that means good morning. And I think from there, I was hooked. And so lunchtime learning with Luis became a daily thing. Every day that I was at school, I would go to Luis. And oftentimes, kind of the way it worked is we had a big friend group. Okay, we'd all kind of be sitting around eating lunch and everything. And oftentimes, I would kind of pull Luis to the side every day, and we would just chat for 5, 10, 15 minutes during our lunchtime. Okay, so that really helped me a lot. And I think at first, Luis was a bit put off, like, oh, I don't know, like I feel a little awkward, like I know you speak English, but this is really important to understand. If you have friends who speak Spanish or family who speak Spanish or a romantic partner who speaks Spanish and they feel kind of like maybe awkward or they often default with you to English, just tell them, hey, this really means a lot to me. I'm trying to learn Spanish. Please speak to me in Spanish. Okay, it's really just as simple as that. Maybe it's a little uncomfortable at first, but slowly you'll get used to it, and that will help a lot. Okay. So I tell people that it took me about 1 year to become fluent. Now, fluency, what does it even mean? Okay, some people say, oh, it's being able to talk about whatever you want, the most complex subjects or whatever. For me, fluency is just being able to have the conversations that I want to have with people. So, was my accent fantastic after 1 year? Absolutely not. Did I understand everything that people said to me? Absolutely not. But was I able to have the conversations that I wanted to have with people? Absolutely yes. Okay. Now, this is a very important lesson. In my Spanish classes, people quickly began to realize that I took a liking to Spanish and I was pretty good at it. So they would ask me for help. And during this time, I was helping people constantly. Hey, Nate, why do we say lo instead of le? Or why is it, fue instead of estuvo, for example? I was the guy that people would come to instead of the teacher because, teacher's busy helping people or doing whatever. So he'd come to me, ask me questions, and I would have to help them. And oftentimes, I would learn by helping other people, right? People often say that the best way to learn something is to teach it, and that's 100% true, okay? As I started to help people, I quickly started to get better even faster because I realized, oh yeah, well, actually, I don't even know the answer to that. Let me look, okay? So then I began to ask questions. Now, it's very important that you're asking questions, okay? Don't just say, oh, okay, yeah, I get that. I think I'm good. No, if you really don't get something, hey, I don't understand. I need help. Okay, so if you don't have a teacher, that you can get help from, join my free school community. I know this is a shameless plug here, but I've got a thing here. Click the link in the video description. I have a free community online. You can literally send me one-on-one direct messages. It is crazy valuable. It's free. If you have questions, send me a message. Nate, hey, I've been learning for X amount of time, and I still don't understand X, Y, Z. I am more than happy to help. Okay, so ask lots of questions. Okay, so it wasn't up until about 3 years into my Spanish learning journey that I started listening to music in Spanish every day. And that was a big mistake, okay? If I were to go back in time, I would have started listening to music in Spanish from day one. Yeah, you're not gonna understand everything that's going on, okay? But music is great because what happens is songs get stuck in your head, you're repeating them constantly in your head, and then you're saying, oh man, I keep hearing the word corazón. What does that mean? Okay, oh right, corazón, oh, it means heart. Oh, okay. Or people can use that with their romantic partner. Oh, okay. Interesting, okay? That is how you're going to learn, okay? Constantly being exposed to the language and then, having to translate. My favorite translator by far, it's free, SpanishDictionary.com. Awesome translator. They have a free mobile app. Highly recommend it. Better than Google Translate, better than all those. Spanish Dictionary is awesome, okay? But I highly recommend, if you're not listening to music in Spanish consistently, you should be, okay? Maybe you like podcasts more or, audiobooks, whatever. Okay, go for it. Remember, like I said, there's no best method, all right? Best method is just showing up, putting in the work consistently. If you prefer audiobooks over music, then listen to audiobooks, all right? Cool. Froyo. Okay, so when I was in high school, I was 17 years old when I started working at a frozen yogurt store. And it was great because as I'm from Southern California, a lot of the customers that came in were Spanish speakers. So, they come with their family, I'd hear them speaking Spanish to each other, and then they would say, hey, can I get a small XYZ? Whatever. And I say, oh yeah, great, let me get that for you. But then I would say something like, hey, I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but I heard you speaking Spanish. I'm actually trying to learn. Would you mind if we spoke in Spanish? I'm trying to get better. 99% of the time, people would say, yes, absolutely, of course. We would practice. I would learn their vocabulary. They would correct me on things. I would make mistakes. It's very important that you're speaking. I think the biggest error that I see with my Spanish students is that they don't speak enough, okay? This could be because of fear. They don't know anyone who speaks Spanish, okay? But honestly, in the modern day, it is so easy to find people online to speak Spanish with. If you have Spanish-speaking people in your community, great. Or if you're, family, friends, romantic partner, take advantage of that. Speak Spanish to people because that is really going to help. Yeah, you're going to be nervous. Yeah, you're going to make mistakes, but that is how you get better, right? Michael Jordan talked about that, right? You have to make mistakes. You have to go for it. And maybe it was Michael Jordan or John Wooden, but they said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, all right? So if you're not even trying in the first place, well, then you're not gonna be able to get to that next level, right? You gotta make mistakes, you gotta fail, and it's gonna be embarrassing, it's gonna be a little nerve-wracking, but I promise you, as time goes on, the more you fail, the better and more confident you're going to get, okay? All right, so speaking of Spanish in my frozen yogurt job, I worked there for a couple of years. Then I started volunteering. Actually, I started volunteering at a really cool organization. I'm forgetting the name, the International Language School for Children and Adults, located in the very prestigious colleges, Pomona Colleges in Claremont, California. And I had the opportunity to volunteer there. So every Saturday morning, I would go there and I would teach conversational Spanish classes to adults. Okay, so I had students from 18 to 80 years old. We had the whole age range in there, and we would choose different conversation topics, and we would chat about whatever, food, travel, everything, okay? And I actually remember one day, a native Spanish speaker was kind of overlooking the class, and I'm giving the class and everything, and someone asked me how to say pepper, and I had said chile, which is technically incorrect. A chile would be like a chili pepper, okay, like something like a jalapeno, serrano, something like that, when in reality, what they were trying to say was pimiento, okay, like a pepper, like a bell pepper, okay, so the teacher's like, oh, Nate, I think they mean pimiento. So it was things like that where I was like, oh, right, okay, yeah. So teaching, I'm telling you, it really does help a lot, okay? And I think a big lesson to be learned from my story is that when it comes to language learning, you have to drop the ego because the reality is we're gonna make lots of mistakes. We're gonna look dumb. We're gonna feel nervous and unsure. And that's okay. That's just part of it. You have to swallow your pride and say, hey, you know what? I didn't know that. Or, yo, yeah, I made a mistake. And say like, oh, yeah, I totally knew that. No, yeah. You just have to accept, oh, I made a mistake. I didn't know. Okay? Volunteer. That helped me a lot. Okay? Then in 2018, it was the end of 2018, I took my first real trip to Mexico. I've been to Mexico when I was a kid on a cruise. I don't count that. One of my first trips to Mexico with my best buddy, Luis, who I met in high school, or actually middle school. And we went to Aguascalientes, Mexico. We also went to the state of Jalisco. And this was my first time really experiencing Mexico. Now, get this. Up until this point, I had been learning Spanish for 4 years. And like I said, at that time, I was like, all right, I'm fluent. I can talk to people about whatever I want. I'm feeling good. But then I quickly realized, after arriving in Mexico, that my Spanish needed to get way better, okay? People were making jokes. All these people at once are speaking to me. I couldn't understand, different accents. And I think I could have looked at this in two ways. I could have gotten discouraged and just been like, you know what? I'm okay at Spanish, but I'm actually not as good as I thought. I'm over it. I'm done. Okay, whatever. I'm going to leave it. But I ended up saying, oh my gosh, wow, I have a lot to improve. I can get way better at Spanish. And this is actually pretty cool. Okay, I'm learning new jokes. Okay, I'm getting used to this new accent. Oh, I'm learning new music. Okay? So that was a really humbling experience for me. So if you haven't been able to travel to a Spanish-speaking country, no worries. If you have, awesome. But you don't need to travel in order to become fluent in Spanish. That's a huge misconception. Everyone says, oh, you need immersion. Okay, you need to, if you go to Mexico and you move there and you live there for 3 months, you're gonna become fluent. That's a bunch of baloney, honestly. It's not real, okay? 99% of Spanish that I learned was in the United States, okay? Yes, I've heard Southern California, okay, that of course definitely helped, but you can recreate immersion in your house, okay? So, speaking with friends online, listening to music all the time, reading books. I always ask students, hey, how can you live the language, all right? Imagine you were born in Mexico. what would your life look like? Okay, well, when you drive to work, you'd be listening to the radio in Spanish. When you would, talk to friends or family, well, you'd speak in Spanish, or you'd be listening to music in Spanish. So try to recreate that environment. Okay, you don't need to up and move to a Spanish-speaking country in order to become fluent. Okay, that's just not true. And if we go over here, I studied abroad in Spain for 3 months, and going off of what I was just talking about, a lot of the people I met there thought this: oh, I'm going to go to Spain, I'm going to come back after 3 months, and I'm going to speak perfect Spanish. And it just didn't happen. In fact, in our Spanish classes, I would watch those people be frustrated and confused because the teacher is only speaking Spanish to them. But if you have no prior context, if you've never learned the language at all, if I'm speaking to you in Chinese, if I say, 我是一个老师 or whatever, if you have no prior context to Mandarin Chinese, then why would you moving there all of a sudden teach you the language? Yeah, it would force you to translate things and look things up and everything, but you need some prior context, okay? I always tell students there's kind of the 3 pillars of learning Spanish. There's the grammar, okay, and the study, okay, the stuff that for most of us isn't that fun, okay? So things like, okay, why do we use the preterite versus the imperfect, or why do we use ser versus estar? Then there's speaking, which is arguably the most important, and then there's listening. Then the bonus 2 are reading and writing, okay, which most oftentimes nowadays comes through, going on, like a texting people, or like a Discord group, or like a free school group, for example, okay? Okay, but I studied abroad in Spain, and a lot of people think, oh, well, that's why you speak great Spanish, it's because you lived in Spain for 3 months. No, my Spanish was already to an advanced level by the time I got to Spain. Of course it helped. And actually, when I came back to the US, all my Mexican friends were like, Nate, why are you speaking like a Spaniard? Or why'd you use that word instead of this word? Okay, so kind of funny how that works, all right? But I studied abroad in Spain, absolutely incredible experience. And I would say if you do have the opportunity to travel to a Spanish-speaking country, then do it. Because not only is it going to help you with your Spanish, but it's just going to motivate you. It's going to show you, oh, wow, there is a whole world out here where everyone just speaks Spanish, completely different culture. So, if you have the chance, then absolutely go travel. It really will have a big impact on you. But you don't need to travel in order to become fluent in Spanish, okay? Now, when I came back from Spain, I had this life crisis because at the time I was studying Spanish in college. I was studying to become a Spanish professor. But after my trip to Spain, I said, hey, you know what? This is a very specific thing. I don't know what I want to do with my life, and if I do this, then I'm basically going to become a Spanish teacher or a translator. And you know what? That's just too specific for me. I'm going to switch to business. So I switched to business, and I started making YouTube videos because I thought, oh, well, I'm now doing the business degree. I'm going to do something entrepreneurial. Maybe I could have a go at this YouTube thing. And so then I created like a little beginner Spanish course, and then I started doing YouTube videos, and lo and behold, it actually worked. There was a bunch of luck I had. If you know the guy who speaks Chinese on YouTube, Arya or Xiaoma, him and I kind of accidentally met online. I have a video on my main channel about that. And then, he kind of helped me, and then he kind of gave me that initial boost for my YouTube channel. And here we are 5 years later, which is crazy. It's 2025 at the time of this recording, and I basically started doing YouTube in 2020. So I'd gone to Spain in 2019, and then YouTube started in 2020. It's actually interesting because in Spain I was kind of having this life crisis of, oh, what am I doing with my life? I don't even know. I'm a young man. I don't know what I'm doing. So then my Spanish host mom was like, Nate, you're funny. You could be an actor, or you're good at Spanish. You could teach that, or oh, you like making videos. Maybe you could go into film or something. And so it's crazy to look back now on where I am and how Spanish has brought me to this point, and to say, wow, looking back, basically I'm doing all of that in one. I'm here teaching Spanish. I'm filming, I make videos, now I'm teaching online. So I've been very blessed, and I really do appreciate you for watching this video and supporting me. And also, liking this video, leaving a comment, subscribing, it really does help a lot. So thank you, seriously. You are the reason that I do what I do, and you are also the reason that I'm able to do what I do. So thank you. Okay, so I was making YouTube videos, and my Spanish started to get a lot better. Why? Because I was speaking so much. Now I was speaking a lot. Let's say I was speaking an hour a day, okay? So it went from, studying, let's say, an hour a day to speaking an hour a day. So I was doing lots and lots of speaking. And then I started to see very fast gains with my Spanish learning, okay? Simply because I was speaking, and I was speaking with people from all over the world, okay? Then this transitioned into more teaching. So now I was doing more one-on-one. I was offering courses to students, beginner, intermediate, things like that. And once again, I think a good lesson from my story is that teach. even if you feel like you're not 100% great at Spanish, try to teach people. Try to teach people in your family, your friends who know nothing about Spanish at all. Okay, so YouTube helped a lot. That was a big lesson. I was speaking a lot. Okay, and then in 2023, 2 years ago, I moved to Mexico to be with my girlfriend Yasmin. And now I've been here for 2 years. And of course, living here in Mexico has helped me a lot with my Spanish. I'm not formally studying. I haven't formally studied for a long time. Just lots of speaking, lots and lots of speaking. And that's why I put this at the end here. If there's one lesson to take away from this story, is that you need to speak as much as you can, and you need to enjoy the process, okay? Try not to fall into the trap of analysis paralysis. Have a great time learning. Listen to music, listen to audiobooks, speak with friends, family, romantic partner, people online, people in your community. Do some grammar study through YouTube videos like this, my free school community. There are many different ways to go about it, but the number one most important thing is to speak and have a great time, okay? Try not to get caught up in the different methods and all these things. Figure out what you like, figure out what you feel like has the biggest impacts on your Spanish. And anyways, that is my story. I hope this video wasn't too long. I hope you learned something from it. And, if you have questions or you feel like I left things out, feel free to leave me a comment on this video. And like I said, check out my free school community, my free Spanish community. Just click the link in the description. You can also go to SpanishLink.com. But it's seriously awesome. Like I said, you can join the free community and literally message me one-on-one. It is crazy valuable, and I don't know why there aren't millions of people in this group, because it's really, 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 really powerful and very cool for Spanish learning. Anyways, muchas gracias por ver este video. Espero que hayas aprendido algo nuevo y nos vemos muy pronto. Hasta luego.